This is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here on Conscious Fit Business Zone with my new sister from another mother, Dr. Amirah Hall. Hi, Amirah. How you
Hi,
doing?
how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm so excited to meet you because there's so much of what you do that I just love and is so needed right now in all the people's lives that are highly sensitive, that are aware of what's really going on in the world today, and that really want to be grounded and be productive and be part of the change. That's why we stood in line to get these bodies to be here right now, in my opinion. But you are an amazing, you have a aptitude to connect into quantum energy and teach mastery in it. You help people with their soul blueprints. You're a near-death experiencer. That's how I got to meet you. You're an author, and you wrote a book called Love Up Your Life and Manifesting Miracles 101. Wow, cool. So why don't we start, if you wouldn't mind, so that my audience could get to know you a little bit, is just share a little bit part of your journey so they can relate to all the amazing things you've done and get to know why you're such a valuable resource. Okay?
Oh, thank you so much for
For
that, Kathy.
sure.
You
My pleasure.
touched my heart. Well, let's see, where do we begin? I've always been a very sensitive girl. I was always told, stop crying as a little kid. I didn't even know what the word empath was. I grew up in Edmonton, Canada, and it was a normal family. So I thought, yeah, it was alcoholic. It was extremely dysfunctional. And so I found my solace is with my own creativity. I was a great artist at a young age. And I wanted to really escape from people, but yet I was really good at connecting with people and feeling their pain and wanting to help people from a very young age. I think I was in fifth grade when I started volunteering. Nobody in my family was a volunteer, but I wanted to. There was a child in the class, and I felt so much of his pain. He developed a brain tumor, but the teacher had always ridiculed him and reprimanded him for forgetting his homework as his tumor started to grow and it wasn't yet diagnosed. And so that was where I think I really started to lean towards wanting to help others and volunteer. After Daryl, he ended up having a massive surgery to have that removed, and he ended up being a vegetable that led me be a volunteer at a rehabilitation hospital. And that started my journey. Again, I would come home feeling rewarded and fulfilled, but I didn't have anybody to share that with. My family disregarded it. It was invalidated. As life went on, I found myself like anybody back in the 80s, well, what was the 70s and 80s? We drank a lot. I drank a lot. Alcohol was the thing to do in Canada. So I think that was a way that I could hide and I could ignore some of the senses of my abilities, my intuitive senses. I sort of downplayed that. Got into college. I studied interior design. I moved away from my family. That too was incredibly traumatic for me. At the same time, my parents were going through a divorce. So I felt that just like my whole world was crashing in. At the same time, I knew things like my parents shouldn't be together. I knew from a very young age that certain things would happen. I remember having visions of my grandfather in my dreams. He would come to me. He came before he died, and then he would come after he passed away. So I remember the dream specifically. We were both walking down a path, and in the dream, silently, he just said to me, "You will go this way, and I'll take this path." And so I just felt that peace of knowing that he was okay and he was taking another path of life. And so I think I didn't register what that meant at that time. But gosh, I think before I was 20, I remember attending 20 funerals. So I had a lot of death around me. And I kept wondering, like, what is it? What is it? Where do we go? And as a Catholic, it wasn't really talked about. There was this limbo thing, or yeah, I was just confused, and I always yearned for a very strong connection with God, but I never got it where I was at the time. So life progressed. I ended up marrying an American. I came to the United States, and we were great. We were good to go for about 3 or 4 years, and then things started to show cracks. I was missing my family. I was missing a connection. I remember saying, I want to have a spiritual connection. And I thought, well, I'm going to start going to different churches. I'm just going to explore. That was in the late 80s. And so I did, and my husband didn't. And it became an increasingly challenging relationship because it was like a square peg in a round hole. I was yearning to be me. There was a force within me pulling me to be me. That's when I started learning about meditation. Funny enough, years ago after that, he said, gosh, I think you should go back doing that meditation because we're good when you do that. So I often think of that. And yeah, so as we progressed, I went my way. I continued to develop. I, enrolled in ministerial training. I started just curiously searching for non-physical, or let's say out of mainstream. So they call it the occult. What was hidden? I was curious. And so that continued for a very long time. At the same time, I was in corporate, and I was a highly successful team member. I was winning awards. I was using my intuition to guide me and to navigate tough relationships and close deals that couldn't have been closed. And I didn't really think that I was using intuition or knowing how I was navigating this. I was just a type A personality, driving hard. We got this. We're going to make this happen. And then as business and my energy was rolling in, my dad died. And at the same time, I was going through a divorce. So my world was crumbling. And again, touched by my dad's death and the energetics that triggered within me, the sensitive person that I was, I really, really needed to know what happens when we die and where do we go, what happens. So I crumbled. And it wasn't, as I was leaving Canada, traveling back through the airport, I picked up the book, Many Lives, Many Masters. I'll never forget it. And that gave me peace. It gave me solace. It helped me realize that we don't end. And it gave me hope. It gave me hope. So coming home, I still had to deal with the divorce, but my health started to wane. And it got so bad. Well, I felt like I had a perpetual flu that went on for about 6 months. My doctor diagnosed me with chronic fatigue syndrome. He said, you need to go home and prepare your affairs because you're going to die or you're going to spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair. Well, let's just say that's not any news that anybody wants to hear. And I went home incredibly depressed. Didn't know what to do. I cried for about 2 weeks. I had a friend that was an acupuncturist student, and she said, look, I've got a great teacher. I think she can help you. But right in that whole, uproar, when things couldn't get any worse, the worst thing did happen. I got fired from my very successful job. Back in the days, they could do that. If you're just not well and you're not going to work, or you start not performing, they can. Yeah. So there I was. I would remember crawling and curled up in a ball at night, crying and just completely lost, wondering what I was going to do. And I remember having a dream that woke me up in the middle of the night. And that dream was there were Native Americans, and they were dancing around a campfire and they were chanting. I was on the other side of the canyon, but I could see and hear them. And they were singing in this language, and I knew the language. And when I woke up, and there was a very profound message, but when I woke up, I couldn't remember the message. I couldn't remember the language. So I was furious. I remember it was like 3 a.m. and I just paced the floor furious. And it came to me a few days later, surrender, surrender. And I thought, shit, I'd given up everything that I loved, and I lost my job, and my family's fallen apart, and relationship. There's no more to give up, right? So I guess the fight was what I needed to give up. And yeah, so that process, it was a 7-year journey of getting into deeper understanding. I began studying with the mystery schools. I studied with the Order of the Golden Dawn and the ancient mystery schools in Egypt, and religious science, and just everything that I could come across. And this was in Southern California. So as time progressed, I started feeling better. I mean, I did detoxing, I did cleansing, I would, get acupuncture and chiropractic, because the mainstream medicine basically rejected me. So I had to find other solutions. And I was desperate. So I did everything that they told me to do. So, and then as time progressed, I started feeling stronger. Started feeling more aligned. I felt more grounded, I guess you could say, and healthy. Well, guess what? I got myself back into the corporate world where I was so successful, and started really, really spinning my wheels and doing awesome work. Money started coming in. That was back in the late 90s, middle 90s. 96. And what happened was I was making the best money of my life. That was a 6-figure salary back then. And so I was doing amazing. And I got this message that I need to go to Peru. I'm like, Peru? Well, it's interesting, So I started doing a little research, but we didn't have the internet. That was in 87. But a friend gave me, out of the blue, oh, I've got a flyer. And she gave me the brochure, and I booked the ticket. I went to Peru. There I had tremendous, lots of experiences of psychic phenomena. We went to the Sun Island in Bolivia at Lake Titicaca. We were there on trying to connect with ETs. I had some incredible experiences, but the one that stands out for today that I'll share is that I was coming through a stargate. We did an ayahuasca ceremony. We were working with a shaman in the jungle. There was a small group of us, and it was a 3-day ceremony. We did, basically 3 different ceremonies, and they were all incredibly profound. And one of the ceremonies, I got this message that I was a starseed, and I came to this planet. I came through a stargate, which back in the late 80s, 90s, I didn't know what that was, never heard of it. And I came and I seeded a being or a human in early Egypt. It wasn't exactly what we know as Egypt. Egypt was maybe bigger in terms of landmass. And so I seeded the planet, and that's what oh yes, and I felt this incredible love, this incredible brilliant light, and I just knew they were my family. I just knew. It's a hard thing to explain. It was so profound and so overwhelming. I cried for 2 days because there was it was like a big cosmic door that slammed shut after I had gone through that gateway. And I felt like they left me. They left me here. I was betrayed. I was tricked. What happened? I thought you loved me. How could you do this to me? And so I processed that in my human form for about 3 days till it started to dawn on me. You weren't left behind. You chose this. You chose to come here at this time into a body, and you were incarnated as a process. And I didn't count the number of incarnations. But in that moment, I knew immediately that I needed to go to Egypt. So that was my stepping stone to get myself to Egypt. So happened, I didn't have the money. And I said, look, if I get, a tax refund, then I will have the money and I'll go. So I said, you got to show me this is if this is meant to be. Sure enough, I got a tax refund, and somebody was referred to me, and I booked the trip to Egypt. So I had an incredible trip in Egypt. It was highly spiritual group. We did meditations in various temples. We did ceremony. We were connecting with, let's say, our ancestors, light beings, star beings. Um, and honestly, I have to say, I was open. I bought into it. I allowed the training and the teaching, but I didn't really get it. I didn't get that these beautiful statues in Egypt were anything more than just granite slabs with incredible carvings that incredible artists created. So and I couldn't remember one dynasty from the next. I mean, it was just such a download of information. I mean, I barely remember doing a science project in social studies on Egypt. So it wasn't like it was something high on my list to do and explore, and I wasn't an avid reader about it. I didn't have that. I had the heart and the spirit calling for something I didn't know. So having been on that trip, I met this dear friend, and he was so incredibly sweet and loving and playful and hospitable Egyptian that after my trip, I stayed an extra 2 weeks. And I went back, pardon me, after the 2 week trip, I went back to Luxor, which is south of Cairo, where our trip terminated. So I went back to Luxor and we hung out for a week. And one of the things that I was just hell bent on doing is I wanted to buy some antiquities. At the time, I was a jewelry designer and I was building my business, and I wanted to have some antiquities that I could incorporate in my jewelry. So I thought that would be really cool, right? And the vibration of it and just the exceptional uh, fact that they were antiquities. So I looked and looked and looked, but my friend, he comes from a small town called Korna. Korna is outside the Valley of the Kings. It's the town you drive through when you're, touristing the Valley of the Kings to go to the Valley of the Queens or the Valley of the Kings, where all the ancient pharaohs, the kings and queens, are buried. So that's the town Korna. And so we were there, and there's a slew of alabaster factories there where they're quarrying the alabaster, they're carving incredible statues and vases and all kinds of things that tourists would like. So in these factories, they're very primitive. They're basically showrooms that are full of dust from the desert and also the alabaster dust, flying around. So he said, "Well, let's go see my friend Mohammed. He's got some of the beads, I think." So we went and we looked at the beads. And I bought the beads, but I didn't have the money. He wanted $300. I didn't have $300. So we came back the following day and went to my ATM, got the money. And so we go in there, and it's traditional Egyptian hospitality. When you buy something, especially when you're with a friend, you are greeted with Coca-Cola, coffee, tea, what you would like. Yeah. So you sit down, you chat, you talk about grandma, you show pictures on your phone of your babies, all of that. So it's very charming and very sweet. And so I'm there. There's only one chair in the place. It's a green plastic yard chair, like garden chair. And so all these guys show up. So they were the workers that work outside the factory. They just came into the room and showed up. And I'm like, "Well, this is interesting." And Mohammed comes out with a joint. And I said, "Well, thank you, but no, thank you. I don't smoke." So he's insisting. He starts shouting. His hands are in the air. He's very animated. And I'm a little nervous. I'm the only female there. I'm the only American. And I rejected him. I rejected the offer, and which is gracious, right? I was really challenged. I was puzzled, and I was scared, coming from a roots of an alcoholic father, where there was a lot of turmoil and shouting and loud voices. So it really was intimidating. I thought, well, geez, I smoked. I didn't. I tried pot a few times, and it never did anything to me. And quite frankly, that's why I never continued. It wasn't my thing. So I thought, shoot, I tried it before. It never did anything. I'll just keep the peace. I'll acquiesce, be a gracious guest, and move on. And we'll be done. I'll pay him and we leave. I might have actually paid him already, but he wanted to. No, I can't remember this part. So anyway, they passed the joint around. There were maybe 8 or 10 of us. Joint went around twice. And then everybody bounced up and we're ready to, they were walking out the door when I couldn't get out of the chair. All of a sudden, my body went numb. My legs were just solid. I just felt solid. And I found myself standing behind myself. I was standing behind myself, and everybody that was in the room, it looked like I was watching, 10 different televisions at Fry's, technology or the computer store. You see all these different movies playing out. And I was like, it was like very strange and very unsettling. And I thought, no, I got to stay in my body. I got to stay in my body. And I must have said something. I don't recall any words coming out of my mouth. I remember having my hands up in front of me, and I remember wanting water. If I could just have some water, I could splash my face and stay here. So I remember in slow motion, my friend Juju, he was approaching me. He did find the water out of the cooler, and he was walking and he poured it into my hands. And I remember getting it this far to my face and then thinking, oh shit, my mascara is going to run. And then everything went black. So as I got black, I don't remember this part because I was unconscious. Later, it was informed that I made a transition. What happened was he ended up dragging me out under the arms, dragged me out of the factory. They were hailing a taxi, which was a pickup truck. They loaded me up in the pickup truck with my head out the window to give me oxygen. Keep in mind, this is 1998. It's extremely primitive. And it's, so he loaded me up in the truck, and I heard, the next thing I heard was myself shooting. Well, I didn't hear that. I found myself shooting through a dark night sky with lights like stars. And I was flying through it like a comet. And I remember getting, oh, I see, that's where I'm going. And it was a small blue ball, and it was familiar. And I was shooting towards that, and the ball get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a huge place. How am I going to ever find myself? So what happened was, I didn't know where I was going to be. I didn't know how to find myself. And then I remember hearing these loud voices in a language that I didn't understand. It was kind of like a beacon that was sort of pulling me back in the place where I left myself. And so it was the Arabic sound of the voices that helped me steer and navigate like a GPS, get close to my body. And then it felt like I was struggling to put on wet clothes. It seemed like it took for eternity to get into my body. And at the same time, I was feeling this incredible bliss and joy and stillness and overwhelming love. And I, thank goodness, my friend was there with me, Juju, and he helped nurture this energy as it returned. What happened was I started to hear the noises as I'm coming closer into my body, hearing these noises and these voices. And then I couldn't open my eyes. It was painful to open my eyes. It was incredibly bright. And I was struggling. So I remember reaching over and touching an arm because I could hear and I knew the familiar voice. And I said, "Where are you taking me?" Simultaneously, I felt like my bowel was going to ready to explode and I needed a toilet like right now. And he said, well, they shouted in Arabic, then they realized she doesn't speak Arabic, then they started speaking in English. It was all extremely frenzied. And then I thought, hospital, oh my gosh, I'm in a village. That'll kill me. I'm thinking of the primitiveness of it and the germs. So I thought, I don't understand why they're taking me to a hospital. I need a toilet. Now, that was a bigger problem. So, for Westerners listening to this, at the time, there was no Western toilets in that village. In fact, what they had to do their business was a hole in the ground. And if you were lucky, you kind of had some porcelain feet positions, to plant your feet. But I did not realize that I couldn't stand up. All I knew is I needed a toilet. So they all this negotiating in Arabic, they finally brought me to his brother's flat. And they had to then carry me up 3 flights of stairs because I couldn't walk. And so I was escorted into the bathroom. Well, another problem that was presented is in that culture, men don't go into private spaces with women ever. Maybe their wife, but that's it. So it's considered a cultural and even religious crime that I'm committing because I'm going into this bathroom. Meanwhile, I'm in total bliss and I've got this long skirt and I'm sitting on the toilet and I cover my legs and I'm thinking, okay, I'm polite and I'm being discreet and modest. Well, Juju, he's just crying. He's just got streams of tears running down his face. And he's shouting at me and crying and he's just frustrated. And he says, "You don't understand. You died. You died. You just," and then he kept saying, "Doesn't your chest hurt? Doesn't your chest hurt?" And I'm saying, "No." Well, and I'm feeling bliss. I'm just sitting here on my throne. And so he said to me, "I pounded your chest with all my might. I pounded it to get your heart going." And then he was shouting my name. The whole village heard my name. And for quite some time after that, I would, when I would go through the village when I returned, or when he would pass anywhere, people would shout, "Amirah." So he was calling with all his might to my spirit. And maybe that was the beacon that was calling me. I don't know. But so we moved off of the throne. He got me into the bedroom and I couldn't move for the longest time. They nurtured me with yogurt. They nurtured me with water and some oranges, fresh oranges, because they were also aware that as a Westerner, we didn't eat anything that wasn't cooked or not peeled. So they knew probably needed to get me hydrated. And so that was part of the process. And I remember looking at this orange and the cells in the orange and the juice was just like speaking to me. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird. And Juju starts taking off his shirts and he's got like 4 layers on because it got really cold in the mornings and then it would heat up. And he's got this shirt underneath that says, "Love is all there is." And I was just, "Do you realize the shirt you're wearing? Do you realize what?" And he's just like, "What? It's a shirt." And I couldn't stop focusing on his shirt. Love is all there is. And across the room, there was this armoire, a wooden armoire. To my right was there's a window. The shutters were opened and there was these sheer draperies, little curtains, and they were fluttering in the window, in through the room as the wind blew them in. And when I looked at the armoire, I would see this goddess, this lion face with a female body. This is what she looks like. Yeah, there we go. Her name is Sekhmet. And she started showing up in this wood grain. And I'm like,
Uh,
"Oh my God, what I'm hallucinating. I got to look outside," because there was the Green Nile Valley, and there was, trees and palm trees in the mountains. That's real. I'm going to keep looking at that because that's real. I'm not looking at her. And I couldn't look at it. From that moment on, I started to understand the deities in Egypt. I started to connect with other beings and entities that other people didn't see. My journey that day, I was flying back to Cairo. So my body started to restore. I got back on the road. Juju flew with me from Luxor to Cairo. I'm standing in line at the airport and my guides from the tour was there. We were on the same flight. And I said, "Who's that lion face with a female body? I forget who she is." And they said, "Oh, she's the healer of healers. She's the patron saint of all the doctors." She's the one that helps heal. And so Sekt's been with me, a very real presence ever since that day. Now, the story actually really just begins for me at that point. I flew to New York, slept most of the flight, had a wide seat, and I could lay down the whole width of the row. I got off in JFK, and looking at all the people in the airport, they looked like black and white paper dolls. And I was horrified. I was like, I don't want to come here. I don't want to be here. This is full of grief and anger and despair and destruction. It was heavy. And I was almost hyperventilating. As I'm thinking about it, I hyperventilate. I got on a flight. I flew to Atlanta. The whole time I had my book. I was reading it upside down. And I knew I was reading it I just went, I can't look up there. I can't look out there. I'm going to look at this because this is real. So I continued to, this has got to be at least 20 hours from my experience, maybe more, almost 24. So I was still seeing things that other people weren't. By the time I flew to Atlanta, by the time I got to San Diego, it was like the warm, moist air getting off the plane in San Diego. It kind of jolted me. There was something that snapped, and I seemed like I was back. But the grief and the anger and the depression didn't leave me for 9 months. And it was like I was, in retrospect, I can say that it was like I was trapped in a dimension of 3D, perhaps, and this incredible anger and frustration within me. Soon, so I started the quest of what happened to me. This was in 1998. There was no internet, so to speak. There were very few books. I didn't have a circle of people that I could talk to about this. Shortly after, maybe a year or so later, I did find IANDS. But going to every kind of healer and psychic and you name it, I went back to Egypt, and I spoke to a holy man down in Aswan, Egypt. Where did I go? What happened? I'm different. I'm the same, but I'm different. And he told me, in Arabic, he was translating, you didn't die, but you went very, 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 very far away. That was his explanation. So I'm like, okay, I can sit with that. Then a friend took me to Mexico, and a card reader she goes, come on, this lady will give you some answers. You'll get a clarity, and you'll know and, validate that it really did happen, because it was so surreal. And there were so many multiple layers of my experience that, I was questioning myself, my sanity, my sense of who I am, etc. So this card reader said in Spanish, and my friend translated, I don't understand the cards. It said that she died. This death card should be over here in the future, that she's going to die. So we had this dialogue, and that's where I went, okay, I could settle down now. Okay, this really did happen. And I can say it did, and I'm okay with that. It was like, gee, questioning your own sanity and reality. Time went on, and I found a healer finally that said, yeah, you got some stuck energy. And I went, okay, great. I can do something about that. And so I started learning about energy techniques. And while I did that, I started to understand more and more about my abilities, what had turned on within me that wasn't apparent or as strong. Maybe I've always been sensitive. I always had psychic propensities, but I wasn't, a declared psychic, for instance, or medium, etc. At the end of the day, in doing this process and doing the clearings and learning about meditation, I had a spontaneous out-of-body experience when I went. Well, funny enough, I went to the book expo in Los Angeles. I thought, you know what? I need to write this book. I don't know how to go about it, but I know I need a publisher, an agent, or something. So I was basically shopping for somebody that will help me put this together and promote it, which I had no clue what was involved. I saw the likes of Carolyn Meese there, and Louise Hayes was there, and I sort of interacted from a distance with some of them, and I wasn't so impressed what I witnessed of people in the spiritual community, how they were behaving. And so I started to understand all that. I was rejected. I was, um, people turned up their nose at me. What kind of notion is that? You smoked something and you got high and nothing but a hallucinogenic. So I was feeling really intimidated and, kind of went back in my shell with the information. Until, at the book expo, they give you all these books, these massive books. The publishers are trying to get you to buy their books. Okay. So I had 2 linen sacks loaded down with books because I was greedy, I guess, or I felt like I couldn't refuse the gift. So I'm loaded down like a, pack horse, and my back was killing me. And I'm thinking, oh, in the hotel, I got to get a massage. I'm going to die. I can't, this is just really bad. So I found a massage place, and I went for this Chinese massage, and the guy was walking on my back. And I had a spontaneous out-of-body experience where I found myself literally coming to a point. It was like I found myself rising up through a staircase that as I got to the top of the staircase, it was like I dissolved into this light body version of me. My earthly part melted. And there was a light being that was there that said that I was going to take a tour of the all, but I couldn't stay. And so it was almost like flying on the backs of a giant bird. And we just flew through time and space. And we entered this building. And this building was, this is silly when I say it. It just doesn't match the feeling. It was perfect. It was beautiful. It was so incredibly precise. Everything was so divine. I don't know how to say it. And even I've never seen a place on earth like this. And I was immersed immediately into what was like a boardroom. And there were like, I don't know, I never counted the numbers, but I'm guessing about 12. It just comes to my mind. And there were these beings, and they were all dressed identical. So they looked the same. And as I was sitting at the front of the board table, all of a sudden their lights were, their heads were illumined with this glowing light. And it was almost like a teapot lid opened up, and these beams of light just shot down into the center of my head. And they told me that I can know anything whenever I need to know it. And I didn't know where I was, but I was next thrown out of that. And I was standing in front of an immense corridor that went on forever. And in the corridor, I saw a hallway, and there were doors on all sides. And my guide whispered or telepathically communicated, you can take and choose any door you wish. So I went immediate to my right, and it was a gold door. And as I didn't enter the room or the door, I just merged into the space, and it was instantly encompassed or enveloped with a moving kaleidoscope of color and patterns. And all I could say is it felt like being in our mother's womb, so safe and so secure and being so warm. And I remember feeling just so perfect and so loved, and so everything was so divine. And again, those words don't seem to really do it justice. And I remember hearing, before I went in there, you can't stay. So then feeling this, I said, well, where am I? And the voice said to me, this is the fabric of all creation. This is love. And it was so yummy. And then boom, I was knocked out of there. And it was like, oh, that was so rude. Oh my gosh, I was just getting into it. And then across the corridor, so I'm being nudged into the next corridor, and across the corridor into the pink door. I walked into that pink door, and I stepped into what felt like a more opaque emerald. It was green, solid green. It was still. There wasn't movement. And I said, well, where am I now? And then I was shown a timeline of my life. And it showed me where my emotions had got the best of me, basically, had been energetic booby traps that had created dis-ease, dysfunction, and destruction in my life. And that was what I needed to clean up, that I needed to detox my body, my mind, my spirit. And that was my job, is to encourage and take that information to helping other people. And to this day, when I reflect on all of that, that has been the inspiration. That's been 23 years ago now, that I'm helping people to access their own spiritual abilities, helping them to connect with our divine gifts, which are psychic abilities, clairvoyance, clairaudience, all of our healing abilities. My journey, healer, heal thyself. And so that is what I do in the work I do now, is teaching others about the power of who they are and how to serve others with their gifts.
So I'm back here going, yay, 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 because I think that's my mission is to help as many people wake up to their divinity as possible. And that's exactly what you're doing. So did you have a lot of yearning? I didn't have a near-death experience, but I had a spiritually transformative experience. Well, I had a lot, but 20 years ago, I had 23 years ago, I had a big one. And I think of it every morning when I wake up. It's still very, just like you explaining your experiences, it's present. It's present in me right now. Did you have a lot of yearning?
Well, what happened for me, stuck in that depression, I was pissed off.
Oh.
I was angry. I was angry as you can imagine. And I got fired again from another job, and I lost everything again because I was really severely pissed off. But that's where I needed to surrender, as that dream told me. And then when I went for massage, talk about surrendering, and then helping me facilitate me so that I could get where I went. Because that whole year and a half, I was asking, where did I go? Where I need validation. What is this? And so I struggled with that. And I can actually, being an empath, being a highly sensitive person, I have to really stay up on my energy and clearing, and using the tools that I brought to share it's highly critical. I think even for people that aren't feeling sensitive, that we need to do that. And really, we are energetic beings. Yeah. We've not been taught how to manage that, how to keep it clear and keep it refined, and so that we can access more wisdom, more intuitions for guidance and inspiration. So I continually am reminded when I speak of this, and my guides have wanted me to speak more and more about it, because for a lot of years I wouldn't. I didn't want to, because my story is not like Anita Moorajani, where, she's got doctors and medicals, or Dr. Eben Alexander. I'm not like that. And okay, lady, you smoked a joint and see, you get what you pay. I felt humiliated because I was Catholic. I partied good, but I didn't do drugs, and I didn't have these weird things. And I thought as a conservative person, I didn't do these weird ass things, to get me in trouble like that. Yeah. So I felt ridiculed. And so I just felt like, okay. And especially after going to the book expo, they just like,
oh, geez. Well, so that's what, it's so fascinating. So much of your story is similar to mine. I remember after having the spiritually transformative experience, flying home and going into the airport, and nothing seemed real. It was like I was out of phase. And that's happened several times where it was like Dolores Cannon says there's extras that are in your movie. Yeah. And it was like they were all extras and me.
Mine were black and white paper dolls.
Oh
And
my
then, and I realized sitting there in Atlanta, holy shit, I think I'm living in the land of paper dolls.
God.
Stuck in this. I'm stuck in this. I'm going into this horror nightmare.
Oh wow. Well, okay, so you have superpower. Well, okay, you already had superpowers. Now you've had two instances where your expanded view of reality has totally changed, and now you're claiming your superpowers after you get over all out of the assimilation of the data. Basically, is what it is, because you have to
You're
make it.
right. There was an integration, an assimilation. And when you say out of phase, I think that's a great word. I was stuck. I think a part of my soul, like when people say, well, how come you have these negative experiences? Well, part of my spirit, I don't think was all the way in my body. And there were negative entities and some of this 3D information that needed to be cleared out of my space. And honestly, that's what my understanding is. We're all not guilty, but we're all struggling with that, to
Right.
clear what's not us so that we can connect with
Right.
align with our divine.
Right, and perfect. And but what you're doing now, I just wanted to bring us up to speed so people could see how you're an amazing resource. Is you work with a group that you call the Beings of Light, and you help people on their soul mission, basically, because your skill set is that you can see things that maybe they can't, and maybe hold the energy for them. That's what I like to think of as holding the mirror up and showing them who they really are,
Yeah.
and holding that energy until
Yeah.
they can hold it themselves.
Right.
Would you agree with that? And could you
Absolutely.
talk about that a little?
Yeah, and the thing of it is I think we were not taught that we are energy. Let's come back to the very beginning, the ABCs of you as a spirit, right? You as an energetic being. So what I do is I give people, I teach people, and the tools, the necessary steps to help us bypass where those energies are stopping you from being your super self, your super enlightened, your super power. And embody that and come into alignment with and integrity with your soul purpose. So it'll look different for everybody. I mean, sometimes it's giving people messages from their loved ones on the other side. I am a medium. I'm a conscious medium and a channel. So, but I teach people very practical tools. I come from a practical world, right? And so, but making the woo woo really real, tangible. And the gift I think you're sharing on this screen is my stress buster guided meditation. It is one of the tools. It's one of the very beginnings. The first time I start working, before I work with a client, they get this tool, and it's like I call it an energy shower. So it's not anything weird. It's just sitting and listening and allowing the energies to start moving using earth energy and cosmic energy, which we are. We're both, from the stars and from the earth. And so we just let those energies start to purge out any interferences and then let go. I mean, we don't need to be in charge of all this. And our analyzer will try to steer us away, but it's a wonderful, quick practice that can help any business person, anybody where you're not knowing how to make a decision, or a challenging situation that comes up, or maybe just the busyness of the day. Just clear it out, so
Well,
you can reset.
that's the perfect gift for everyone right now. I believe that everyone is being upgraded to at least the first step. If you've been very left brained, that you're going to first become an empath. And
Yes.
that's going to be pretty confusing for a
Yes.
lot of people. So this going through a process like this and releasing the stress and tension of not knowing, is this mine or is it theirs? And actually coming to peace with, actually, as you said before, surrender
Yeah.
is is the name of the game, because there's a bigger game being played than we actually know if we're just using our five senses. So this is a wonderful gift. And this is, I've been putting it, it's at your website,
Yep.
/stress-buster, and I'll make sure it's everywhere. But I want to make sure people have this. This is a wonderful opportunity.
And to your point, Kathy, is that I've been getting this message for probably the last 6 months, actually 1.5 years. I've been really being kicked by my guides to be visible. I mean, I've been doing this work for 23 years, but only through referrals. And, so much has changed, the technology and the, COVID and locations, etc. So I've been pushed, and I feel like there's a lot of other people just like me. You may not do the work I do, but your work, whatever that work is, whether you're a printer, whether you're a publisher, whether you're a speaker, whether you're I don't know, a financial planner. We all have our work and our role to play, but we're being pushed. It is game time. It is go time. And there's no lollygagging around now, because either things are going to get so tough, but you're going to be challenged to use and trust your intuitive abilities, and which is your inner GPS. We've got to get clear. That's all I know.
Yeah. Well, I think with the gift that you're offering of the validation of, because a lot of people will have, you'll be able to explain to them what their maybe what their life lessons and plans were, and how to adjust so that they can release that energy so they can have a much more joyful life. That's the first part, understanding, but you also can validate a lot of their knowing so that they'll be more comfortable with their senses, because you don't have to go through an intermediary to get all this information. But there is something to be said about validation, where it's like, am I crazy? Did I make that up?
Absolutely. And that's what I was going to say is finding a mentor, somebody that can support you and you're not cuckoo, and giving you the proper tools and the guidance to sort of hold your hand, but not do it for you or impose their beliefs even on you. But yeah, I offer trainings on that. And if for anybody that's listening that feels like that's speaking to them, I'd be delighted to talk to you on my website. There's a place where you can talk to me, and we can book a 20 or 30-minute conversation about what your next steps would be, what it would look like. And that's a good place to start too, because I know for myself, I was, there's just a lot of noise in this industry, this field right now, that there's, you need to have discernment. You need to have your hat on your wits about you and knowing who you work with.
I think people, you can tell when you hear someone's voice and their resonance that it's your guide or your mentor. And I want to encourage people to go to Amirah's website and check it out, even if it's at the front page of it, or go to the Stress Buster page and really see if she's your guide for this next step, because there's so many people came here. I believe we stood in line to get these bodies to be here right now during this huge time of change. And the one thing I know by being a volunteer for IANDS for the past 6 years and being around a lot of near-death experiencers is that they are courageous, and they show people how to be courageous and break through their blocks, their shadows, their stories, and be who they really are down to the core. I'm getting chills even saying this. So I really want to encourage you that if you are sensing that this is the path for you to really go to Amirah's site. I don't know why I keep doing that.
I think of a miracle. I know it's a tough name for Westerners to remember. A miracle. Yeah, think of it that way. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that you are going to be part of the IANDS event that's coming up at the end of August and first part of September. And I'm going to show the website real quick. And just if you could share a little bit, because if people cannot come to the event near Washington, D.C., they can buy a ticket to watch it online.
Yes.
And everything's recorded. So if you miss some of it, you can
Yes.
have your next dinners for the next 3 months in front of your
Yeah.
TV and watch this later. But it's a heart opening. Like if you've never had an experience, it's almost like you walk into a vortex of love, because all these people, there'll be about 500 or more people there that have had an experience of some type, whether it's spiritually transformative or it is near-death experience, and they're living it just like we're seeing Amirah do. Is you're seeing that this is quite a profound knowing, and you get to feel it. These people went to someplace else and they're living that love. So so I just thought I'd share that. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're sharing here?
Well, I'm going to be sharing more of my story and also some of the tools that I teach.
Oh, great.
But also, I just wanted to say, Angela told me that they've got the largest already registered from that they've ever had. So
Yeah.
more and more people are waking up and wanting to know. Maybe they've had their own experience. So just connecting with others that have had this experience, and I'm so honored and humbled to be amongst the incredible leaders, light leaders that are speaking there. I'll also be sharing some stories of messages from the other side that I've received from working with clients, and it's helped anchor my own conviction and belief that I'm not losing my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a constant dance, I think. Of course I believe it, but it's still every day kind of new, and it's wonderfully exciting and inspiring every day.
Don't you think, Amirah, that part of the benefit of all of this is that you can see people's worldview? There's people that kind of go through life that they're expecting only the best to come through, the best case scenario, and that everything's a gift in some way, even though it might not be visible at the time. But everything is it for you, versus the people that everything's against you and you have to protect and you have to put up boundaries and all of that. I think that's a big part of this resonance, is that to seeing the gift in this existence. And when you're around this many people, and I've been doing this for 6 years, so I've been around amazing people, and it's like a field that you walk into, just like going to Sedona and walking into one of those vortexes. It's like a bubble, and it bathes you in the remembrance of who you really are. And it does come through the digital recordings as well. It's a frequency.
Beautiful.
So
It's so beautiful. I can't even imagine. It'll be my first time going there in person. So I'm truly looking forward to it. And I really encourage everybody that's listening to get your ticket, either in person, get there, make it happen because you can, and or watch online, and just bathe in it. Bathe in it.
right, because this is an opportunity to be the powerful being that you really are, and to be around others that are speaking their truth. You'll feel the difference between the inverted matrix and all the changes we're going through, where the truth is embedded into falsehood. You're going to see a space where none of that is relevant.
Right.
There is no manipulation, because people are in frequency and they can read it. So it's not telepathic. It's not quite. We're not quite there.
You
but
feel it, but you be it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know each other. It's like an instant knowing.
Yep. That's why I said it, you're like a sister from another mother. You know,
That's,
you right away know, oh, she saw something I
I
saw.
think you're going to say sister from another star.
Yeah. Well, either way, what we're talking about is having the joyfulness brought back into your existence and a path to that so that you can share freely your joy and your gift.
It's
And
beautiful.
that's what we're all
Yeah,
cheering you on right now to do. So, right?
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. That's it.
Okay.
That's all. It's very simple. Surrender.
Well, it sounds simple, and it
I know.
sounds like I think the other part is staying in that meditative state where you're maybe in this field, but also an observer of this field, like we are right now. You and I both are out there. Um, you know, that is a skill set. That is somebody has to practice.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't matter where you are on your journey, whether you've had one experience or multiple experiences. It's all perfect. It's perfectly designed for your expression, and we just welcome your essence in this soup, this recipe of love that we've created here.
Yeah.
So, well, anyway, I'm sorry we have to end this. Thank you so much. This was
Thank
fantastic.
you. Thank you
Thank,
so much. I
oh yeah.
truly, truly am honored and pleasure to be here.
Oh yeah, well, I'll see you in person at the end of the month.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Coming soon, isn't it?
thank you. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Thank you,
Okay.
Amirah. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thank you. Bye bye.